to extremely low levels, below the level of inflation. So in real terms, negative rates are on offer. And this is designed, as I mentioned a moment ago, to push investors into more risk-bearing assets. And as those prices improve, as we believe they will, investors will again have to look at IPOs, again have to look at more illiquid types of investment, and that, I think, will be the catalyst to providing the basis for the next bull market in capital raising for companies such as those that are present here today.
Thank you. In Israel, the government has always supported the high-tech industry with various ways. We had in 1993 the Yozma Fund, and then the support of the chief scientists through incubators. But actually, what is very, I think, unique with the Yozma Fund is that Yozma co-invested with other funds, and the government didn't take decision in which company to invest. Now, Alexander, in Russia, things are very different. I see that the role of the government regarding investments in private equity is very important. You have the Westphalen fund with $14 billion, the RVC fund, Skolkovo, and the new entities. Do you think that the best way to support the private equity industry in Russia is to let the government take the decision and invest governmental money in and select high-tech companies?
Well, short answer is definitely no. Our governments generally are not good at picking winners, and the Russian government is not an exception. And they realize that, and that's the key reason why they require matching funds or private co-investment in virtually every project they fund. Take it Skolkovo Foundation or Russian venture company or Rusnano. Skolkovo, as a relatively early stage investor, we are trying to use Yozma as a role model. Skolkovo in the last 18 months backed 156 companies for the total of $270 million, and we attracted roughly 170 million, so that 40% of total funding from private sources. And a significant chunk of that came from private equity and venture capital funds. So we currently have partnership agreements with 48 VCs, 2/3 coming from Russia and the rest from outside of Russia. Companies like Bessemer Ventures, Alloy Ventures, Oxford Biosciences in the US, Quadriga and I2BF in Europe, and Tamir Fishman in Israel. So we are trying to build a network of relationship that would allow us to outsource decision making or picking winners to private investors. It will take time. We are not starting from scratch, but we are starting from very low base. As I said, private equity and venture capital market in Russia is relatively a new thing. It's very small as compared to other asset classes, and until recently it was not very competitive in terms of risk, return, and liquidity. But we see significant improvements in the last 5 years.
Thank you. You have a comment, Jonathan?
Yeah, thanks. Is this on? All right. I'd just like to say that I think the role of government in stimulating investment is absolutely paramount. There's no question. We raised the funds for Plastic Logic from Rusnano, which was a Cambridge startup, pre-revenue, ended up raising over $400 million in capital, in venture capital from Rusnano and other Russian banks. And President Putin himself actually walked around with the device, sort of promoting that. Now, obviously, that was a very, very close involvement with that particular investment. But in terms of stimulating investment, looking at what the Jersey government does, for example, with their initiative here in Israel, and working more collaboratively with Israeli startups. The same with the UK government around the Canary Wharf area and having a sort of a tech hub The whole stimulation around investment and drive towards really financing, interesting technology companies, not just in Israel but globally, is paramount to the success, I think, of tech and other sectors too. So I would fully endorse. Stimulate, yes. Get involved, maybe not so much. I agree.
I'm not complaining about those funds. As you know, Westphalen invested $50 million in our new Russian-Israeli funds, so I really support this type of government involvement. Maybe, Alain, we spoke about fundraising through IPOs in Europe, but maybe regarding how to approach the venture community in Europe, the private equity community in Europe, and raise money with this type of investment entities.
No, clearly, private equity and venture capital is the default, alternative to public markets, especially for the later stage companies. Private equity typically is a more expensive source of equity capital. So a lot of times issuers, as they get to a later stage, they prefer to go to the public markets. But I think that especially in these type of difficult markets, achieving the kind of valuations where old expectations used to be is very difficult. And I think that, private equity does come with a lot of, key advantages you don't have in the public markets. Clearly private equity is smarter, money. The partners and many of the investors in the various funds bring a lot to bear to the investee companies, and they end up, clearly helping them drive those businesses forward and opening doors that clearly, institutional investors in the public market clearly don't do. And clearly the alignment of interest in terms of the motivations of the private equity funds for their returns are clearly, benefiting the companies. Now, I think for over the years that there's many companies that I've seen in kind of later stage, kind of ready to go public. I've actually, advised not to go public. My personal view is being a private company for as long as you can is actually better than being a public company. Many of the, whether it's, disclosures and all of the costs related to being a public company, quarterly filings and everything else are just a huge burden. And if there's no compelling reason to be public, whether it's for employees or other reasons, my personal advice is typically to continue being private and raise private capital. I think that, Catalyst, I've joined Catalyst. I think that it's a very interesting platform. There's a very attractive market opportunity right now in Israel and in Israeli companies branching out into emerging markets. And I think the Catalyst can be very helpful to many of you here in the room. And we look forward to having more deeper discussions with many of you and seeing how we can help you with your strategic goals.
Thank you. Since I don't want the audience to be late for lunch, I will ask only the public if they have a couple of questions that would like to ask to our guests. I'd be glad to take a couple of questions. Yes? Let me.
Hi.
If you can introduce yourself, yeah.
My name is Ariel Gorfang. I'm the managing director of an Israeli-based investment firm in clean tech. And I actually want to make a few comments rather than a question and then maybe get a feedback. I think Israeli innovation, the early stage, was for example, the SP7, the program, the European program, which is very, very popular and very, very good. It takes about 18 to 24 months to complete. And then you start working with another company, let's say a German company, we're talking about a 2-year development program. For an early stage startup, 4 years is a very, very long time. So I think there's a failure in the system where the early stage and most innovative and highest risk are not able to reach, especially the German market, which is very difficult to compete in because it seems like the infrastructure of support from the government is so good that you have to be a German to enjoy it, and you probably enjoy it better. The other side is exactly the opposite, what I think the Skolkovo group now, the foundation is doing, and the Rush Nano, and you have the Chinese. They're very, very active in Israel in trying to help fund small, young, early stage companies, or the funds, part, and help them open the market. So today for an Israeli company, it's very good to go to China, good to go to Russia. It's very easy. I have at least 7 companies which are doing now projects in those countries, and I'm failing repeatedly doing in Germany. For instance, I'm not able to do any project in Germany. To be fair, the German technology is very good. Also, we have to, we have to say that it's very competitive. So the question is, in terms of not IPO stage, but earlier stage, what do you think Israeli companies should do in Europe? How should they raise money? How should they get in front of projects? Maybe it's too general a question, but...
Quick reaction on your comment on the timing. Typically we say a long-term plan for European, it goes by the quarter of a decade. And a long-term plan for an Israeli, it goes by the quarter of an hour. And that's why we have difficulties to match your expectations in terms of timing. But, regarding fundraising, you're correct regarding China and Russia that they have a lot of resources, but de facto you see 88 Israeli companies raise money in Europe. And for Israeli companies, it becomes more and more difficult to raise money in the US. If you don't have a few $100 million market cap, don't waste your time and money there. So Europe is still an alternative. It's true that the markets are closed today, but I think on the long run, it makes sense for Israeli company to go and raise the money in Europe. That's what happened. We have more money raised in Europe than the US since 2005, and I think this trend will continue. Now, maybe someone wants to address the other comments that we heard? No? Yeah.
The only thing I would like to answer, because you said something what I mentioned before, that in times of high volatility and increasing competition worldwide, we should speed up our R&D programs, our cooperation, our bureaucracy, and so on. And therefore, I think in these times, we have to work as quick as possible in R&D programs of the European Union, in the advisory of law firms and other things. Therefore, I think these times of high volatility are times of new chances, but we have to act and to react as fast as possible.
Maybe another question, perhaps Peter Hasenberger. Fine. Maybe, so if we don't have any question, I will let you enjoy your lunch. Thank you very much for the participants, and see you later.